Family, what's up? I married a complete stranger. When you get into a relationship, your partner will change. Mm-hmm. And if you just marry based off of love and feelings, that could shock you. So how do you feel about the changes that have occurred within our 12 years of marriage?
All the changes that we have gone through were necessary. However, because I was not expecting them, it is very hard to accept change. It's like growing pains. All relationships and situations are different, but especially when you've been with someone for a substantial amount of time. I just knew I was in love with my boyfriend from high school. So by default, we grew up together and we experienced so many growing pains that other teens and people in their early 20s are privileged, I guess, to go through on their own. So it's not as hard because you don't have someone just watching you grow up. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So all of the changes that we experienced and went through, they were all necessary, and they're the things that have brought us to this point, like the best place we've ever been in life. However, you don't know that when you're going through it. You know what I mean? So you're always looking at it as like, you different, or you're changing, or what is going on is foreign to you. You don't know at that time. Like, just go through it, just be cool. It's gonna get you to where you need to be.
Yeah.
It's hard to experience uncertainty with a person and a situation that you once felt so certain about.
Yeah, and we just want to prepare the next generation for what they might experience.
The changes are going to be both good and bad. Every single change has led us to the present, but some of the changes that we've experienced have had like an adverse effect. So for instance, even though earlier in our marriage, when you were very present, like when we first got married and we were just young and excited, and then towards the middle of our marriage when things got rough, and now where we are today, it's amazing. But there are some things that the ignorance of what life is going to bring, you don't have those cares. So now that we've grown up and we've been through so much, even though we're in a much better place than we've ever been in, you still have to deal with the trauma and the effects of what the changes brought. You know what I mean? So like, I know that we both have probably experienced not being as careless as we was. Like, it's not good to be careless as far as being responsible, but I mean like easily not being worried or things not being able to really shake you. That's something that both changed about us. We never were like worriers and like, okay, we gotta do this, we gotta do that. But that has become the case, especially when you have children in the picture. Like, we make it a point now to be intentional about holding each other accountable about not worrying and stressing out. Let's just figure out a plan and what we're gonna do and how we're gonna move forward. But some changes happen and you really have to work at not letting those changes and the past trauma from the journey negatively affect you. I would say that's a change that we both experienced. We were both like so unbothered at a young age, and it turned into like, okay, we gotta do this, we gotta do that. Like, we really both became like warriors to a certain degree.
And that's because once you realize how important marriage is, things intensify, you know what I mean? And you have to deal with that mental adjustment, that mental health situation, because more is at stake now. Oftentimes people don't think about the mental strain that marriage brings, you know what I'm saying? Because we're into business with one another, we're doing different endeavors here and there, and you want to see these things work, but you start to stress about that, and stress can make you a different individual. You know what I'm saying? So you have to be open enough and willing enough to talk about those things so that you can work through them and your partner can transition with you through that journey. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And most of the changes that we've experienced both were like equally negative and positive. Like, I would say like our communication has been one of the biggest changes. Like, he didn't communicate at all during the early parts of our marriage, and now we've been building and working on our communication, and it's just amazing. Like, he's so much more open, he's so much more patient when it comes to listening to me, because I told y'all I talk a lot. But also, like, because he's more vocal now, that was like a change that I had to get used to, because it's like I was all here for him being vocal and communicating when it was on my terms or beneficial for me. And then when it was times like he expresses his opinion more now than he used to, even if it's things that we want to see done differently, I wasn't used to that. So it was like, can we just go back to the days when you hardly ever talked? Mm-hmm. But that was because it was things that I necessarily didn't want to hear him say, although they were beneficial to our family and the construct of family. It's like, okay, he has changed. You guys have done work in the department of communication, so you have to accept that in every area of the marriage. You can't just like, I want you to communicate when it's emotionally or about my feelings. Like, no, he's learned how to actually communicate and articulate what we need done as a family, what is going to get us to the next level. So I have to learn to accept the new way that he communicates in all areas of our life.
So when it comes to communication, like, I had to accept her changes too, you know what I mean? Because how we were brought up, you're supposed to cater to your woman's emotions. Mm-hmm. You know, they really don't package it that way, but when you really break it down, you got to please your wife, and that's what it boils down to.
Happy wife, happy life.
So as a man becoming or understanding who he is, you become more assertive, because it used to be the other way around. I really used to placate to my wife on every situation, like, what do you want to do, or what do you think, or how do you think it should go? And like, that's been an adjustment for me, because I used to just, you know, ask her everything. Like, I don't care, let's do whatever, you know what I'm saying? But now you have to not only change, but be willing to accept the change that comes from your spouse when you do change.
Yeah, okay.
You know what I mean?
So what changes came from me that you had to accept or adjust when you started to, like, communicate more effectively?
The biggest shock was how she gravitated towards the change. Like, it really freaked me out, you know, having or looking at your wife as a form of a confidant, or even somebody who's gonna come up with decisions. When I come up with a decision and she's with it, you know what I mean? She's like, baby, you know what I mean? Just to have that support, it really makes you, like, you know, you gotta take a step back, kind of sort of like, dang, this is different, because I wish I would have been brought up that way or seeing that, but I wasn't. I was always seeing women make decisions. So to see my wife really gravitate towards me leading was truly trippy. It tripped me out.
Because once he started to just be vocal about our plans and the plans that he had for our life, like, I trusted it and I saw it happening, and I always believed in you. That was one of the things that I loved most about you. Mm-hmm. You just didn't see that in yourself. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, you were so in your own head, like always a thinker, thinking about things, but you would never talk about it and say it. So when he finally started to assert himself, it was like, yes, okay, what next? Because it's like an equation. Once you see that 1 + 1 = 2, you gonna go with it. Like, he's always been like a hard worker. He's always been very headstrong in a good way. Like, once he focuses on something, he's gonna get the job done. Like, he's not a stranger to doing what he needs to do to get things done. So when you add that to actually being able to plan and communicate those plans, like, I mean, I always wanted him to do that. So it wasn't an issue for me to follow. I was always asserting myself because I felt like I had to.
Yeah, and it's just crazy to transition from that to knowing that you actually have help or somebody that supports you. So not only is it a good feeling, but it's a feeling that you need to get used to, because you used to either not doing something or having to do all of something because the lines of communication haven't been open, you know what I mean? So it really teaches you how to trust your spouse and work together. So what is the biggest change that you've had to make thus far in the marriage?
Oh, that's easy. Controlling my emotions. Like, women, we are such emotional beings, and it's just a huge burden on men, I feel, like you stated earlier, to cater to a woman's emotions. You don't want to seem insensitive. In all actuality, like, if as women we don't learn to control our emotions, it'll get us nowhere. So I think how we talked about earlier, that a lot of changes that we've seen have had equal opposite effects. I think that has kind of thrown you for a loop as well, because whereas you've always wanted me to like not be so overly emotional, just sometimes use logic so that we can make a decision. Don't always think like it's an attack, or because you're talking, or because you've asserted yourself and we have to make certain decisions. Use logic to think about it and make those decisions. And since I've learned to do that, I realize that sometimes it takes you aback. I still am an emotional being because I'm a woman, but I've learned to be more logical and use principle when it comes to most situations, which is something that he taught me. But now when I use those tools, I notice sometimes that he's like, dang, you know what I mean? Like, did you have to say it like that? When I wasn't being rude or anything, I've just learned to be very assertive. And I've learned that with a lot of relationships in my life, because I've grown and learned how to say what I mean and mean what I say. It kind of takes people aback because
like, is it something else? You sure you done?
Or like, did you have to? I'm not being rude. I'm just being straightforward. But I was never like that in the past, so it kind of takes people aback. I used to just smile and like I would nod and smile. So now I'll say like, that doesn't work for me, or what do you mean by this? Or, you know, I've just learned how to actually communicate in a healthy way, even though he enjoys that, because I'm not always like getting emotional and staying in my own head and feeling some type of way. I think that was still an adjustment for you.
We come from dysfunctional environments where you're talking and people are just listening to, hearing you to respond and not really listening. So when I seen that she actually became more logical, the flip side was it made me become more, I don't want to say emotional, but open to emotions and expressing my emotions. Like, so by her taking in what I was pushing out, it changed me and allowed me to push out what she was giving me as well. So it's just a beautiful thing when you're open to change and you're not so fixated on controlling the situation and the environment, because that's what we see. We come from backgrounds where you see your parents or your mom do the same thing over and over and over again. They say the older you get, the more you get stuck in your ways. But when it comes to marriage, that's one of the most dangerous things you could do, because your spouse is gonna change, you gonna change, and you're gonna want people to accept when you change. So that means you have to be able to accept when your spouse changes as well and have a good attitude about it.
That goes back to what we talked about in our last video. We should really pay attention to the moral compass of a person. Like, it's not just about love. You have to pay attention to the moral compass of a person, and that'll allow you to trust the changes in them as time goes on, because even though it's a lot of uncertainty when change comes and it can be scary, but if you know that the moral compass of this person is in the right place, and it always has been. We've all gone through situations we didn't necessarily want to go through, made decisions we shouldn't have made, or made mistakes, but there should have been like a constant pattern of, this person has a good heart, this person makes genuine decisions for genuine reasons. Right. And that's one of the things that helped me to navigate through all the changes in our relationship, because that's one thing about him that has never changed, like the genuineness of his heart. He's a uber honest person, like the good, the bad, and the ugly. He's gonna be honest. Like, you've always been an honest person, and a person that self-corrects. Is that the proper term? Like, yeah, since high school, like that's how he's been. Like, he'll do or say something that I didn't like, and I never had to like blow down like you did, or you, like, he'll always like to this day, for the last 15 years, he'll always come back in time and be like, yeah, that was wrong. You know what I'm saying? So because I fell in love with a person that I knew their moral compass was intact, that made it easier for me to navigate. Although it was still hard, I didn't have to wonder, like, why you doing this?
The mental health aspect is very serious when it comes to marriage, because if you acknowledge that that's a thing, or that you deal with situations, it'll help you be able to navigate better. So when it came to the changes in my marriage, it affected my mind. Like she said before, we just kind of glossed over everything, but when you really figure out you got stuff to deal with, like, it affects you, and you need to be prepared for that, because it'll change your attitude, it'll change your emotions, and your spouse will be looking at you like, what's good?
Yeah.
But you really got stuff you're going through and that you need to deal with. So we go through things and it stresses us out, it bothers us, that changes us. We need to be in a place where we can talk about those things, so that your spouse can be there with you to help you navigate and support you, and vice versa, so that we are strong and we stay connected. Because when you don't factor that in, you just gonna think your wife got an attitude, and then that's gonna give you an attitude. You know what I mean? It's just
everybody got attitudes.
Everybody got attitudes, but we don't know why we got attitudes for. So, like, knowing that things will change you, and knowing that you have the support of your spouse will truly help.
Which brings us to our next topic, which is learning how to be vulnerable. That's something that you have to learn to accept and come to grips with the fact that the support of this person is helping me. I need it to, like, admit that you need the help and support of that person.
Mental health is truly serious, man. Like, we got to go on this journey and be honest with one another, because you're going to have to speak about your issues if you want to have a successful marriage. And that's all we trying to do, like, give you an open forum into our lives so that we can all navigate and have healthy and strong families. Marriage will teach you how to know yourself and your spouse. If you're not prepared for that, probably ain't gonna make it.
Yeah.
Gotta strap your boots up, and you gotta put that work in, man. Marrying a complete stranger, that's what I did. But now getting to know this young lady has truly been a blessing to my life, and I know that her getting to know me has been a blessing to her life as well. And that's kind of what marriage is all about. Coming together to build something that will pass on blessings for generations to come. Thank you all for stopping through here. We really appreciate it. Make sure you give this video a like, make sure you subscribe, and make sure you hit that post notification bell so you can be caught up on all the content we produce, because this is what we do. Much love, much respect. You know the rest.